Thank you very much. Trafficking in human beings has different forms, and only estimates exist regarding the real dimension. Although there are different forms of trafficking in human beings, anti-trafficking work was focused on trafficking in women for the purpose of sexual exploitation in the last years. Other forms of trafficking in human beings, especially trafficking in human beings for the purpose of labor exploitation, has attracted attention only recently. But different forms of trafficking in human beings require different and adapted measures against it, and all measures need to follow a comprehensive approach. This allows combining prosecution, prevention of trafficking in human beings, as well as the protection and strengthening of victims' rights. Based on the Palermo Protocol, the extension of the definition of trafficking in human beings to labor exploitation requires additional skills, knowledge, and awareness for effective investigation and prosecution, and for the identification and assistance of victims in this form of trafficking. Actors such as labor inspectorates, social investigation services, and municipalities, other than police and the prosecution services, have also become involved in these activities. It is unclear which role these actors can have in identifying victims and in investigating and prosecuting trafficking for labor exploitation, and which improvements are needed. They are often unfamiliar with, for instance, the specific needs of victims, how trafficking networks operate, and how to cooperate with other authorities or colleagues abroad. These problems obviously hamper the combating of trafficking in respect of labor exploitation. In addition, difficulties in defining trafficking for labor exploitation still exist. When considering the explanation of exploitation given in the Palermo Protocol, one can make the distinction between trafficking for the purpose of sexual exploitation, labor exploitation, including forced and compulsory labor and services, slavery and slavery-like practices, forced begging, and removal of organs. Therefore, these problems, as well as the challenges of tackling these problems, have to be identified. As a judge, first of all, the legal framework concerning trafficking in human beings for labor exploitation and the dimensions of this crime have to be analyzed. Trafficking is legally defined in the Austrian Criminal Code and follows in general the definition given in the Palermo Protocol. The forms of exploitation provided for in the Austrian Criminal Code, Article 104a, Section 3, are sexual exploitation, removal of organs, labor exploitation, forced begging, as well as exploitation in order to commit criminal offenses. Exploitation within the meaning of Article 104a includes the ruthless and lasting oppression of vital interests. The perpetrator has to intend to oppress the vital interests in the longer term. The interpretation of sexual exploitation as well as labor exploitation is mainly influenced by the case law on pimping. Under this offense, exploitation occurs when the majority of payments are taken away ruthlessly. Consequently, vital interests of the victim are infringed. Not only can lack of payments amount to exploitation, but working conditions can also lead to an infringement of vital interests. Exploitation is not foreseen when difficult working conditions are compensated with higher payments. Exploitation also includes circumstances where regular working hours are excessively exceeded or when working conditions are unacceptable. Payments falling slightly under the minimum wage foreseen in collective agreements in Austria, as well as the occasional exceeding of average working hours, will not amount to exploitation. Summarized as action with the definition of the Palermo Protocol, the Criminal Code lists recruitment, harboring or receipt of persons, transportation, offering, and passing on. Means include the deceit, abuse of power, exploitation of situations of distress or mental illness, or any condition rendering the person defenseless, as well as giving or receiving of payments or benefits to achieve the consent of a person having control over another person. There are different levels of sanctions foreseen. The usual penalty for trafficking in human beings can be up to a maximum of 5 years imprisonment. Aggravating circumstances include trafficking in children below the age of 14, committing the crime within the activities of an organized criminal group, causing particularly serious harm for the victim, or the use of severe force, will lead to sanctions of between 1 and 10 years of imprisonment. So the legal framework is an European standard and seems to be sufficient. In practice, Austria's policies and measures against trafficking in human beings still seem to be driven predominantly by the notion that trafficking in human beings is linked mostly to exploitation of women, predominantly sexual exploitation, and that trafficking in human beings necessarily needs to encompass a certain level of force, threat, and confinement of the victim. As a matter of fact, cases of trafficking for labor exploitation are rather rare. The most frequently mentioned sectors in which trafficking for labor exploitation occurs are the catering sector, agriculture, and the construction sector. Further sectors are the exploitation in households, especially in diplomatic households. So what are the obstacles for efficient identification and investigation of trafficking crimes regarding labor exploitation? The first obstacle seems to be that the insufficient victim identification by the actors involved. Actors who are involved in identifying and investigating cases of trafficking for labor exploitation may differ from those authorities which are usually involved in trafficking for sexual exploitation. Authorities which are usually involved in the investigation of trafficking cases are mainly the police, public prosecution service, and the judges. All these authorities conduct trainings in trafficking in general. The main different actor in the labor exploitation field in Austria is the control unit for illegal employment, which is now part of the financial police, and which is allowed to enter business premises and further rooms, also private homes, in which employees might work. Further authorities which are also allowed to enter work sites and business premises are the Labor Inspectorate, the District Health Insurance Fund, and the Construction Workers' Annual Leave and Severance Pay Fund. These authorities have specific tasks, such as protecting the security at the workplace or tackling illegal employment, but THB, trafficking in human beings, is not in their scope of responsibility. Therefore, no specific staff trainings or victim identification trainings are offered. With regard to situations in which exploitation might occur, it is on the one hand often not clear what indicators of trafficking might exist, and on the other hand it is not clear under which circumstances the police should be contacted, although there is always awareness raising. The second obstacle seems to be insufficient cooperation of the actors involved in the investigation and prosecution of cases of trafficking in human beings for labor exploitation. After identifying presumed cases of trafficking, it is rather unclear how to cooperate in cases of trafficking for labor exploitation. The control unit for illegal employment, for example, does not receive information on further investigations after having filed a report at the Public Prosecution Service. Apart from the general legally defined cooperation between the various authorities with regard to trafficking is not determined specifically. Cooperation in cases for trafficking of human beings for sexual exploitation is practiced since many years, and the authorities and NGOs involved are quite clear. Regarding trafficking for labor exploitation, there is still no formalized cooperation between the relevant authorities and institutions. Cooperation with regard to trafficking for labor exploitation seems in general to be rather low and not elaborated enough. A certain level of cooperation between the actors mentioned exists, but the intensity of cooperation varies significantly, and especially concerning cases of trafficking. It's not clear how actors are supposed to proceed. Third obstacle seems that there is a need for a use of a wider range of investigation techniques. There is still the impression that the statement of the victim is the most important evidence in cases of trafficking in human beings, which must not be true, because various techniques can lead to numerous evidences. Acoustical and visual observation of persons supported by technical instruments, observations, recording of telecommunication, monitoring of communication or a request for information on bank data which can be important either for investigational reasons, in order to gather evidence, or in order to support the confiscation of profits at a later stage of the proceedings. Practical experience showed that consequently the statement of the victim still plays a crucial role throughout the investigation and proceedings, because these other means I mentioned before are extremely time and resource consuming. But we have to be careful to demand from the weakest link of the chain, the very often traumatized, addicted and intimidated victim, to shoulder the whole proof of a whole case. The fourth obstacle is that the victims very often don't cooperate with the authorities. It is difficult to assess whether a case is trafficking in the person entered Austria voluntarily and knew what they were going to do in Austria. The lack of identification is also linked to a general uncertainty about which cases could be assessed as cases of trafficking for labor exploitation. Closely linked to the above mentioned notion of victims of trafficking is the issue regarding the circumstances under which the work is done. Persons come to Austria in order to earn money and therefore shoulder burdens such as poor living conditions or dangerous working conditions. But uncertainty exists over where trafficking actually starts and ends. Generally, indicators on identifying trafficking cases for labor exploitation do not exist in Austria. In trainings for the control unit for illegal employment, the police usually refers to the general indicators developed by the international organizations, but cannot refer to Austrian specific indicators. The development of indicators on trafficking for labor exploitation would facilitate the work in this area, and identified key indicators would include whether the person is able to move freely and if there is any form of violence happening. However, especially with forms of trafficking for labor exploitation, it needs to be stressed that the definition of trafficking does not require violence. Other means can also be used. Comparing the situations, the situation of compensation paid in cases of trafficking for sexual exploitations and trafficking for labor exploitation, it can be seen that with regard to labor exploitation, more legal opportunities are provided in respect of access to compensation. So let me come to the conclusions of these observations. There is more training regarding identification needed. It's already offered, but there is still room for improvement. And this would have a great impact regarding awareness raising. The system of identification should not entirely be based on identification by the police. Also, the civil society is an important actor, for instance, with regard to women exploited in households. Structure and competences of the involved authorities also have to be clarified, and all means of gathering evidence should be used to tackle these problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.